Hey, welcome back to Pre-Law Talk. My name is Joshua Garlick. I'm a current BYU Idaho communications student who will soon be applying to law school. I created this podcast in order to inform pre-law students about important topics such as the LSAT, the application process, law schools, and some advice. So now that we've discussed each of the sections of the LSAT, the materials to use, and some timing tips, I wanted to answer some final questions about the LSAT that students have frequently asked. And I want to thank the Pre-Law Society on the BYU Idaho campus for helping me come up with some of these questions so that I might be able to help other students who have the same questions. So we'll just dive right into it. All right, so the first question that we have is, how do you take a diagnostic? This is talking about the LSAT. A diagnostic is simply a base test to help you get a base score, which will help you determine your starting point. This is a good reference for taking the LSAT because you need to be able to see how you're improving and to kind of, feel good about your score and how you're improving upon that. So it's good to take a diagnostic to know where you're starting at. And it's also good for some other things whenever you're looking at like which law schools you want to go to. So to take a diagnostic, you simply are going to take a full practice exam as soon as you possibly can, preferably before you do any other prep materials and go through these giant books that you have to prepare with. You want to take a base of where you're starting. The second question that has been asked quite frequently is, how are scores distributed, or how are scores determined on the LSAT, and what's a good LSAT score? So first we'll talk about how scores are distributed. So the range of scores for the LSAT are between the numbers 130 and 180. So 180 is good, 130 is the lowest possible score that you can get. Scores are determined upon a normal bell curve. So whenever you take the test and you get a specific number of questions right, they will take all the tests of all the students that have taken that same test at the same time throughout the country, and they will compare them one to another and place you upon a normal bell curve distribution. So if you know what that is, then 68% of scores are going to be within the first standard deviation of the mean. And the mean will change, obviously, because some tests are easier, some tests are harder, and so the mean might fluctuate between that 130 and that 180. But for the most part, test makers try to keep the average around 150. And so I'm also asked a lot, what is an average or good score on the LSAT? And this is kind of a tricky question to ask. It's actually just a plain trick question because the average moves dependent upon whether the test is harder or easier, whether or not students throughout the country get more answers right or less answers right will change what the average score is and what a technically good score, I guess, is. So some good ways to determine what a good score are for you personally are, one, you got to take a diagnostic to know where you're starting, to know where your base is, and that's hopefully that's your bottom. Number two, you want to look at schools that you're aspiring to get into and be accepted into, and look at their LSAT means, so that you know what you kind of have to score, what the bottom percentile is and what the upper percentile is to get into that school. And third, you just got to keep practicing and keeping track of your score, so that you know, whenever you're going to take the actual LSAT, what kind of score you're looking for and how to tell whether or not you're going to get that score while you're taking the test. So moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about some prep test materials. I've talked a little bit about some already in the first podcast that I created, but I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the different ways that you can prepare. So these are all just, remember, this is all just my personal opinion. So take it as you will. If you have any comments to leave, please do so. But this is the way that I see it. There are several ways to prepare for the LSAT. Number one is independent study. And in order to do this, you have to be pretty self-motivated. You have to be good at, keeping on top of your own studies to do it independently. Number two, university courses, which are offered at most universities. These are useful if they're done well. Kind of depends on where you're at and whether or not your university has a good course for the LSAT. And number three are prep courses, which are offered. They're kind of expensive, but you got to look at it as an investment. So if you're willing to put the money down now, then maybe you might get into a better law school. So those are the three ways that I see of preparing for the LSAT. So if you decide to go with independent study, my personal opinions are that the PowerScore Bibles are the best books that you can get for independent study. And of course, it'll be necessary that you have several books of the 10 actuals so that you're taking actual prep tests. Other than that, there's some other good materials out there. I know I used the LSAT trainer a little bit at the beginning just to understand the sections, but then I went more into depth with PowerScore, and that really helped me boost my score up. If you're going to take a university course, obviously it's going to be subject to the location and whether or not a good prep test or prep LSAT course is available. So I can't really tell you whether or not that's going to be good. You'll have to look into that yourself, maybe ask some people that have taken that course already. And as far as prep courses go, I was going to comment on this. I've done some research about them. And I've taken several free trials from some of the courses, but truthfully, it just wasn't my style. So I didn't do any of the free prep courses, or not free, any of the prep courses that are offered online, just because that wasn't really what I was looking for. And I kind of worked better on my own. So if you're going to do those, you might want to be asking some people that you actually know that went through the course, take some free trials, look at what they're doing and what's offered within those packages, because I know they can be pretty expensive, but I also know that they can really help out if you need that structure in your preparation. So all right, another frequently asked question: when is the LSAT offered? The LSAT is offered in the months of February, June, end of September, or early October, and December. So those 4 times throughout the year. More importantly, when should I take the LSAT? So you want to be able to give yourself a good amount of time so that you have at least more than 2 opportunities to take the LSAT before you apply to law schools, because truthfully, you never know what might happen. I decided to take it a little less than a year and a half before I'm applying. I'm planning on applying for fall 2017, and I took the June 2016 LSAT. But just like I said, you don't know what might happen. I ended up breaking my arm 10 days before the June LSAT, and my score suffered because of it. And so I had to take it again, and I just barely took it this past September 24th, 2016. And I still have a couple opportunities. So I have the December, the February, and the June again. If I wanted to apply for another year, a later year, or if I wanted to take it in December, I could and continue to apply for next year's application. So just give yourself enough time, because you don't know what might happen. So another question that I get asked is taking the LSAT more than once a bad idea? This is a really good question. And truthfully, it depends on a lot of things. It depends on the school that you're looking at going into. Most top-tier schools will acknowledge at least all scores that are reported for your LSATs. So if you're trying to get into top 10, top 15, you might want to look at whether or not they take the average of those LSAT scores, or if they simply look at all of them combined in a more general view. Other than that, most law schools currently are just taking your top LSAT score. So that's great. So if you need to take it more than once and you do better the second time, that first time will be erased. They won't even see it. They won't know. So don't worry about that. Other than the fact that you might have to explain large gaps in score differences. So like me, my first time I took it in June, I didn't do too hot. So if I do really well this past October, I'm simply going to, write that up in my addendum that, I broke my arm 10 days before the LSAT and my score suffered because of it. And so the second LSAT is a better representation of my abilities, and they'll understand that. So I'm not even worried about that at all. So just to answer the question frankly, it is okay to take it more than once, but if you can avoid it, do it. I was never planning on taking it more than once, but circumstances change and you take it more than once and you move on. So that's about that. All right, one last question before we head out. This one's kind of an interesting, fun question. So, during the test, do people ever leave the LSAT? And truth is, yes, people do. Sometimes they are realizing, this isn't working out, or they're just so stressed that they get sick and they don't feel good, so they're constantly going to the bathroom and vomiting or something. Best advice I can give you, try not to stress too much about this. Get a good night of sleep before the test, leave the studying to before the day of, hopefully, or the day before the test, so that you can just concentrate. But yeah, people do leave. And what surprises me actually more is how many people don't show up. There are empty seats at every LSAT that I've gone to, which is only 2, but it's mind-boggling that they'll be willing to pay the price and then not come up. So, well, that's all I got for today. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions or that I haven't been answered, please contact me and I will get those answered. Or if you don't agree with some of the statements that I've made, that's totally fine. I'd love to hear from you and just respond. Thanks. Special shout out to bensounds.com. Thank you for Ben Sounds for all this free royalty-free music. Bye, guys.